because by description, fire only exists as process.
hmm It's literally on its way. It's fire. I love this. Fire is the real world equivalent of becoming. You go from one state to another perpetually. It's magic.
I mean,
It's yeah.
chemistry is that too. So, in a
Yeah.
sense,
Oh yeah.
fire being, but I thought it was funny. I guess to go for a little bit later. I was thinking, well, fire in a sense is the exchange of energy, which commonly is a release of energy, which would be fire. But also, it can involve an endo instead of an exothermic, we can have an endothermic reaction that takes in energy. That's still, I'd say, part of this process.
So like the earth can be an endothermic.
I forget, there's like some chemical reaction, you put two of them together, and instead of creating heat, it actually absorbs heat because the process requires it.
Ah, yeah. Um, I have a question, stupid question. Hegel bit off on the color theory of someone.
Goethe?
Goethe.
Yeah, Goethe.
Goethe. Yeah.
Does Goethe's color theory deal with the absorbability or non-absorbability of white and black?
I have to take a look. I think he had like darkness and lightness as
Yeah.
both existing,
Okay.
which I think, if I was understanding correctly, fits better with the eye or the perception of color rather
Yeah,
than necessarily physical aspect of color.
right. Co color color would seem to me to fit well, okay. It's probably both, but the way that we experience it is probably more phenomenological. On the other hand, the light spectrum is real, whether humans
Yeah.
exist or not. So,
Yep. Yeah,
you know,
there's the spectrum of visible light, and then there's color theory, or which is the perception of light.
I find it fascinating that there are two separate color theories, one to do with the paint colors and one to do with light colors.
Yeah, because one's about
And they're not the same. They're
yeah,
not
it
the same
has
at
to. Yeah,
all.
that's because I think one as additive makes it darker necessarily because of how that pigments work versus light itself,
Yeah,
which makes sense because pigment is the absorption, and so it's what light it rejects is what you see
right.
versus light is the light that it presents is what you see.
Yeah.
So they're in some ways inverse.
And it's not I it's dialectical, but not really.
Yeah.
But really.
Yeah, I need to go back. I need to go. I have Hegel and Newtonianism that I think has a section specifically on this before I might have enough summary of Goethe that I can go over.
Actually, now that I think about it, so Newton had his own color theory and Goethe had his own color theory and they weren't the same either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goethe was probably better than Newton. Newton was
Wh-
correct in that it is a sum of colors rather
yeah.
than being a mixture of light and darkness. But he was more wrong because he said it was literally the seven colors that Roy G. Biv.
Yeah.
Well, we know today it's just sort of it's all the wavelengths kind of each are independently somewhat of a color that goes through a change spectrum,
Yeah.
which is more accurate to Goethe than it is to Newton.
Yeah. Mm,
Which I
excuse me.
think that additive lightness and darkness would be more effective as like positive and negative interference,
Mm-hmm.
which is why
Yeah.
his is more accurate. But
Jim,
anyways, yep.
Is your bookshelf filled with books that are just sort of stacked up everywhere on their sides? Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a rhetorical
Yep.
question. Nice. I
In
was
this
like,
one room.
yeah.
It's not
I'm
a
like, I'm like, I can't tell what any of those books are because you've sort of stacked them on their sides.
Yeah.
It's cool.
yeah, that's almost like a Doug style stacking at this point because how much you
It
have.
is, yes, or the Ghostbusters. Uh, Never mind. It's a joke from Ghostbusters in the library. No one stacks books like that, except they do. That's one thing I always laughed at about that scene. Like, how can you find anything if it's all in a back storage room and in like towers, right? You have to work
Well,
extra
that's
hard.
why when I'm for my library, I'm going to buy some NFC tags. They're especially for the stickers, those are actually way cheaper.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So with a little bit of distraction because we were trying,
Yes.
getting ahead of our own on this. Uh
Yes. Let
go
me.
back to good.
Uh, can I go ahead and just start us off reading 331B?
That's what I was about to suggest. Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
one of us.
So, yes, the process of fire, the activity which in the previous process was only implicit in the differentiated determinateness of the metals brought into relation, when posited as an independent existence, is fire, whereby what is in itself combustible, like sulfur, the third kind of corporeality, is kindled into flame, whereby also in general those bodies in which difference is still indifferent and inert, as in neutrality, are energized into the chemical opposition of acid and caustic alkali, not so much to a peculiar kind of real corporeality, for they cannot exist independently, as merely to a peculiar positive being of the corporeal moments of the third form. So I'm remembering. I remember remembering way back at at the beginning of the logic and in Marx's Capital, how you look at two terms and you realize that their truth together is contained in a third term, and this is
Yeah.
along the same lines of thinking.
I think how much that is just because of the syllogism going three, or is it
Yes, yeah.
part of it's
Well,
also here because part of the chemical process, and I guess this is what we'll find for the next one, is that it does toward an end result. So this is the process of the chemical reaction, is what I'm
yeah, because
thinking.
if you
Yeah.
put two together and you skip the fire, then you get that third thing. But before that is the process of becoming, and that's what this is the
Yeah.
fire.
It's only yeah.
So with the cessation of the galvanic process and the production of the metallic oxide of earth, the course of the chemical process is interrupted. For chemical processes do not hang together, otherwise we should have life. The circular return of a process. Wow. Okay. So this is life is a circular process. Fire seems to be a one-way
Yeah.
process.
Well, it's
Like
kind of
there's
think about it. Life is a itself with steroids become the first example of a self-sustaining chemical process. Like there's some chemical processes that weave back and forth, and life's is well, it seems to be lifelike. Lifelike is chemical processes that perpetuate itself,
well,
right?
that's interesting. So like the fire. So like the making of a commodity, the process of the making a
Yeah,
commodity is a one-way process, whereas the process of capital is
yeah,
like life,
yeah. And like literally, if you think about it, when we eat and we
circular
burn calories, that's
reproduction.
yeah, it's reproduction where we're almost literally burning the food in a way. In fact,
Yeah,
that's why we have a temperature. Um,
yeah,
so it's like that in that sense, that's the fire that keeps perpetuating itself rather than the one and done here. Because as soon as all the there's no reproduction in this, like you said.
right. Well, that's an interesting question because if life contains this particular process of fire, then abstracted from life, you can say that, but fire is not abstracted from life in the real world. So really, it's just a sort of a
Yeah, it's
like a tunnel look at this element.
right. In this
Like,
case, it's a moment of the actual process where it this is one and done. the life process is the same process, but
Yeah.
restocked, basically.
Yep. If now the product is to be carried further, activity must come in from outside, just as the metals too were brought together by an external activity. It is only the notion, the inner necessity, which therefore carries the process forward. It is only in principle that the process, mm, sorry, is carried onward into a circular totality. He's basically saying what I just said,
Yeah.
except much smarter. Damn it, not again. The since the new form we introduce has its genesis only in us, comes to be only in principle or in itself, we must take the bodies entering into the process as they naturally are. It is not the same existing product. Here, therefore, the oxide for which the galvanic process closed that would receive further treatment, as it were, only by other reagents. As in itself determinate, the object of the process must be taken up as something original, not something which has come into existence. That it has come into existence is a characteristic it possesses as a simple inner notional determinateness. So he's using an awful lot of I hate to use the word science terms, but you might be more familiar with so like reagents, oxide. Um, I only took one chemistry class,
It's
so
been a while, so I had to deal with reagents, but I don't even remember what they do.
yeah. Um,
It's a sub.
But
Oh,
anyway, he's describing the process the of fire.
it's an intermediary. That's what it is. It causes a reaction to flow, but it itself, kind of like like a catalytic converter in the car, it requires
I don't even
the
know what that does.
I forget it reacts with the exhaust coming out to be able to deal with the carbon dioxide, and requires I forget the metal in it that makes it so people want to steal it. It uses that to react rather than to react upon, but it doesn't actually get used up in the process.
So it's valuable.
Yeah,
So like the copper and new housing builds, people will stop
yeah,
by to steal that or your catalytic converter.
yeah.
Interesting.
Palladium, yeah, that's what it is.
Of course it's palladium. Yeah. It's the same thing that Tony Stark used to make his arc reactor. His mini arc reactor. I know it yeah. I keep distracting us with fictional things.
Eh,
Okay.
I mean, art reflects reality, reality reflects art.
Art reflects reality.
Unless you're Alex Jones, they're literally the same thing.
God, that man is a work of art.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. He has everything said is true out in front of him, but he laid his bed and can't say
It
it.
is, but he backs all of the Epstein pedophiles to the hilt. I'm like, God. It makes me think he knew all along. He just tried to pin it on the left.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's always been a John Bircher, which is, one of the early fascist groups that
Oh, I know
inspired
who
the
they are.
Nazis. So,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
yeah,
Don't get me started. Oh,
it's not the same.
anyway, carry on.
Yes,
I'll hand the baton to you.
since the new form introduced has genesis only in us. Yeah, let's take the body's. It's not the same existing product here, therefore oxide. Yeah, object process must rather be taken up as something original, not something which has come into existence. That is, that it has come to existence, the characteristic it possesses is simple inner notional determinants. One side of the process is fire as flame, in which the unity of difference which resulted from the galvanic process exists for itself, namely in the form of free, restless activity of self-destruction. The other side, a combustible substance, is the object of fire, of the same nature as fire, but in the form of a physically existent body. Yeah, so you can't really have a flame without a source to keep it going.
The fire and the flame.
Yeah, the fire
Yeah.
and the flame. But
That's a song too.
the the product of the process then is that on one hand, fire exists as a physical quality, or conversely, that it in the material substance there is positive what already constitutes its natural determinants, namely fire. Which again, I kind of take here as like, yeah, you have the bonds of the substance, even like wood itself, that you can release that when you start igniting actually gets released. Um, At the first process was the process of what is heavy, so here we have a process of what is light, in which fire assumes the bodily form of an acid. Yeah, it eats away. The physical body, as the possibility of being consumed and activated, is not a mere lifeless reduction to passive indifference, but itself burns. Okay, catch up. And now, because the material thus activated is inwardly a sheer opposition and so self-contradictory, it stands in need of its other and only is in real connection with its other. So it's only a potential before it actually activates. Yeah. Yeah, there we go again, the possible versus the actual. The combustible substance therefore has two different forms, since this being for self of the negative in determining itself as different, posit itself in its own differentiation because it's getting burned. One form is the ordinary combustible substance, such as sulfur, phosphorus, etc. The other form is a neutral substance. This is not the nature of either, but only a mode of existence to persist tranquil. Whereas in the galvanic process, the metal's indifference constitutes its very nature. Oh, I think it's because when it gets burned, it becomes neutralized, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
A more remarkable feature of these substances is their mere shining without burning, the phosphorescence shown by a number of minerals. Yeah, I think some of that is phosphorus in the structure. Where they are scratched or scraped or even exposed to sunlight, they remain phosphorescent for quite a time. It is the same sort of transient light phenomena as electricity, but without dualism. Yeah, because it's inherent in the thing, right? The range of primary combustible substances is limited. It embraces sulfur, bitumen, and naphtha. It is and I don't know some of these older chemical names. It is the brittle body without a firm, indifferent base, which does not receive difference from outside by combining with an active different body, but which develops the negativity immanent in itself as its own self. Again, becoming. I can see that right there. The
Hmm.
body's indifference has passed into a chemical difference. The combustibility of sulfur is no longer the superficial possibility, which remains possible in the process itself. Such an indifference is actually abolished. Yeah, possibility to actuality. The combustible substance burns. Fire is its actuality. Yep, it was my turn to get ahead. It does not merely burn, but burns up. It ceases to be indifference, has become an acid. Of course, acid here in a metaphysical sense. Indeed, Winterl has maintained that sulfur is as such an acid, and in fact is in since it neutralizes saline and earthly bases and the metals, even without making use of the water-based hydrogen. Yeah, I think this is when they had it backwards still. Required by the rest of the acids.
Yeah.
The second form of combustible substance is the formally neutral body, and the existence of this too is only a form not constitutive of its nature. If it were, it might survive the process. Yeah, because it's neutral until you burn it. The formally neutral
Yeah.
bodies.
No, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, the
Sorry.
formal neutral bodies, salt is a physical neutral body, are lime, Bartes, potash, and in a word, the earths, which are nothing but oxides, i.e., they have a metal for their base. Okay, discovery which brought to light by the galvanic battery, whereby alkalis are deoxidized. Yeah, that's true. Okay, the alkalis too are metal oxides. Okay, that's correct. That makes more sense. The alkalis too are metal oxides, animal, vegetable, or mineral. The other side to the base, example in lime, is a carbonic acid reproduced by heating charcoal, a chemical abstraction and not an individual physical body. It's yeah, because it's dissolved in the water. Lime is thus neutralized, but it is no real neutral body, such neutrality being affected only in an elemental general way. Bertie's strontium are not regarded as salts since they are not neutralized by a real acid, but by the same chemical abstraction which appear as carbonic acid. These are the two combustibles constituting the other side of the process. The substances in conflict with each other, contradiction, is the process of fire come together only externally. This is conditioned through the finitude of the chemical processes. They are mediated with each other by elements, i.e., air and water. To produce the acid of sulfur, wet partitions and air are used. The whole process thus has the form of a syllogism with a broken middle term and two extremes. Okay, the more particular forms of this syllogism concern A, the modes of the activity, and B, that to which the middle term is determined by the extremes in order to integrate themselves from it. To deal with this more closely would involve going to refinements of detail which would make us digress too far. Every chemical process would have to be set forth as a series of syllogisms, with what was at first an extreme becomes a middle term, and the middle term gets posited as an extreme, which now I'm starting to think about like chemical equations at this point, where sometimes you have to write multiple steps. What in general happens is that the combustible substance, sulfur, phosphorus, or some formally neutral substance is activated in the process, which I think that's a reagent. It is thus the earths are made caustic by fire, whereas in the previous state, as salts, they were mild. Metals, too, especially bad metals, the calcareous metals, can be activated by burning that they do not become oxides but are driven straight on to become acids. The oxide of arsenic is itself arsenious acid. Alkali, if activated, is caustic. Acid too attacks and destroys bodies. Since sulfur and similar substances contain no indifferent base, water here becomes the basic bond, so that the acid can, even though only for a moment, exist independently. But when an alkali becomes caustic, the water which, as water of crystallization, which is no longer water, was the bond of neutralization, loses its formerly neutral shape under the action of fire. Such an alkali already has its own account in an indifferent metallic base. The water which is crystallization, I guess because it's just like the acid, it becomes dissolved in the water and becomes no longer neutral. You're muted.
So, I want you to talk to me a little bit about this because you've commented a few times that they have the water part backwards in
At
terms and this is the water process. So,
well, what they had at the time was they kind of thought the hydrogen part was what made it water, and the oxygen was the part that gets burned. I'm trying to remember exactly, and
yeah.
it's like they had for electricity, they got the wrong thing positive.
Okay. Does that affect this? Actually,
No, in terms
we
of
haven't.
water, no. But when they say hydrogen in one side and oxygen on the other, sometimes they they may mean the opposite. Where one is hydrogen, one is oxygen. It's like they just get flipped. But for water, water is water.
Yeah.
If they just I'm trying to remember exactly. Yeah, I might just have to quickly ask an AI.
That's okay.
Well, a little later on, chemists developed the idea that acids were proton donors and
Yeah.
alkalis and bases were proton acceptors.
Hmm.
So go back to water, the H part will be the acid, the OH would be base.
They misunderstood roles. Yeah. The flammable part must be the essence of fire. Oh, yeah. Oxygen was discovered independently. They called it deflossionized air. Okay. This part they may have gotten it better. It was actually under phlogiston they had it wrong. And then they flipped it back with actual chemistry and showed water as a compound. Okay. Yeah, if you think about it, hydrogen is called is hydrogen, water generation, while oxygen was acid former. So the names got stuck, even though we know what they are today. But yeah, that was part of it. Yeah, what Jim said.
Yeah. Cool. I'll go ahead and read this, if that's okay.
Yep.
Neutralization water process. Body thus differentiated is in a sheer state of sheer opposition to its other. This is its quality, so that it essentially is only in its connection with its other. It is only by violence, consequently, that its corporeality has an independent, separate existence. In its one-sidedness, it is in its own self the process of positing itself as identical with the negative of itself. Fire, water. Yeah.
Neutral,
E-
yeah,
yeah.
it's
Even
its own
even
opposite.
yeah. Even if this process is only with the air in which acid and caustic alkali lose their strength, sich abstumpfen, that is, are reduced to formal neutrality. The product is the concrete neutral body, a salt. Sorry, which is the fourth kind of body and in the form of a real body.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking about it in a sense like an acid and a base reaction ends up with
Yeah.
the water and salt, some kind of salt.
Yeah.
So it is your double neutral.
There you go. I love how he dips back into describing the ideal here because he
Yeah.
says a metal is only implicitly different from its other. The other is contained in the notion of the metal, but only in its notion. So you have the metal, and then you have the notion of its other, but only in the idea, like in your head, and it's implied. Like with this one sentence, so much is unraveled about the mystery of reading a book like The Logic and trying to figure out, well, how does the other work, right? Well, right here, you have a
It's like,
he says, okay, you have this gold bar, and then you have the idea of the gold bar, and the idea of the gold bar contains its other, but the gold bar does not contain its other. There you go.
yeah, it's like in a sense it can also be posited. The other is posited because it's in a sense it's the end of the reaction that it's not there yet until you react it, but the metal's then gone.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you're dealing with processes that cause change like this, um, being able to encompass a process from one metal to another, and the process in between, the only place that those actually exist in one place is the notion. In real life, we perceive a linear set of events, but in the notion, you have the whole process. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think it was yeah, but since now each side exists as an opposite, it's the one it now the one sideness is entirely posited. Yeah, which
Yeah.
is what I said.
Yeah.
Posit, yeah. Yeah, I just want to read this. The individual
Yeah.
body, therefore, is the urge to overcome its one-sidedness and posit the totality, which, in its notion, it already is. Yeah, the opposites thus activate. And some of this is going over. Each has its own self. The restless urge to sublate itself, to integrate itself with its opposite and neutralize itself. Yeah, chemical reaction is a sublation process. One thing, and a lot of things are, I guess, technically. Acids get hot, catch fire when water is poured on them. Yeah, they're not capable of independent existence since they're not incompatible with themselves. So that makes the difference where water has to be in as a maybe even as a reagent. Concentrated acids give off fumes or water from the air. Concentrated sulfuric acid, for example, increases its volume and this way occupies more space but becomes weaker because it's diluted. Acids kept in airtight vessels attack the vessels. Caustic alkalis similarly lose their causticity. It is said that they absorb carbonic acid from the air, but this is hypothetical. That might be proven now. The truth, rather, is that they first form carbonic acid from the air in order to neutralize themselves. I think that's a metaphysical statement more than a literal. What activates both sides is the chemical abstraction. The chemical element of oxygen as a differentiated abstraction. The bases, even if only water, in the different substances the bond. The activation of both acids and alkalies is therefore an oxygenization. Is that what we go back to that? Oxygen supports combustion is correct, but I thought it was acid former. Oh, I think this is being a little more accurate. But the difference of acid and alkali is something relative, as already appears in the opposition of positive and negative. Thus, in arithmetic, the negative is to be taken partially as negative in its own self and partly as merely the negative of another. So it does not matter which is negative and which positive. Yeah, you negate both sides and it flips which is positive and negative. The case is similar in electricity with its two opposite directions, where the movement to and fro brings one to the same standpoint, and so on. Acid, therefore, is certainly in its own self what is negative, but the relativity of the relationship also makes its appearance. What from one side is an acid is from another side an alkali. Yeah, I mean, it is a spectrum, right? The pH, or from the other side, the pOH, which is the inverse, because that's how alkaline it is. For example, sulfur of potash, for example, is called an acid, although it is hydrogenated sulfur.
Yeah.
Like here, then an acid is a hydrogenization. Yes, that's literally what acid is. The proton of hydrogen floating around as an ion. Admittedly, this is not so in every case, and it is here due to combustibility of sulfur. Through oxidization, however, sulfur becomes sulfuric acid, which shows that it is capable of both forms. Which, yeah, that's got a lot of oxygen in it. Okay, H2SO4.
So we call from chemistry that for some substances, it can act as an acid in certain reactions, and the same substance can act as a base in other kinds of reactions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Which
it's like if it's
which means the whole
oh,
system is quite relative.
Yeah.
Uh, I always found that I always found that amusing that
which is
even the system of designations was relative one to the other
Yeah.
substance.
yeah, that's I think it's what we were trying to say like, that's what we're about to start getting into is literally the relativity.
Well, when I mean, you know, when you're a kid and they describe chemistry to you and they talk about acids and bases, like
Yeah.
it's such a misleading label because it, um, you know, like you'll like watch cartoons and see like a jar filled, you know, and it's labeled acid, and and now you look back and you're like, that's not even an accurate label in some cases, depending on what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, it's just fascinating,
It's
you
just
know?
like dialectics is not thesis, antithesis, synthesis, even though it is to a certain extent true.
Yeah,
Keyword limited extent.
really limited. Yeah.
Yeah. The same is true of a number of earths which fall into two groups. Lime, Bartes, and strontium are alkaline and metallic oxides. Beta, in the case of silica, clay, and talc, this may be conjectured partly by analogy and partly from traces of galvanic process in the amalgam. Which, by the way, I looked up the sulfuret of potash is also known as it's potassium sulfate. So I guess potash is something related to potassium. That finally hit me. Yeah,
Yeah.
they changed the way we have chemical names. Yeah. Stevens, however, opposes talc and silica to the alkaline series. According to Schuster, alum also reacts to alkalis, i.e., is acid. On the other hand, its reaction to sulfuric acid is that it takes up position of base. Clay in solution alkalis is precipitated by acids and therefore behaves as an acid. The double nature of alum is confirmed by Berthold. Uh, Silica, says Schuster, is a acid, though a weak one. It neutralizes the bases and then combines the potassium, sodium to form glass. Just curious again, was it forget what alum is? Double sulfate salt. Okay, yeah, that's a pretty complex looking chemical structure, but it has a sulfate on it. Okay. Here too, air and water act as middle terms for anhydrous, completely concentrated acid, which can never be literally waterless, has a much weaker action than dilute acid, especially if air is excluded, or then action can cease altogether. The general abstract result is that acid combines with an alkali, which has not been brought to the activated stage, to form a neutral substance as such, which is, however, not an abstract indifference, but a unity of two existent substances. They sublate their opposition, their contradiction, since they cannot endure it, and is thus sublating their one-sidedness. They posit what they are in their notion, both the one and the other. It is said that an acid does not act directly on metal, but first turns it into an oxide, into one of the sides of the existing opposition, and then neutralizes itself with this oxide, which, though differentiated, is not activated to the point of being caustic. It is the salt which, as a production of this neutralization, first is the chemical totality, the center, but it is still not yet the infinite totality of life. Yeah, we're about
Yeah.
there. But
Yeah.
totality comes
Yeah. Yeah. We're
last.
getting there. We're heading that direction.
Well, plus I'm also thinking back, but how do you come to a rest circumcised by other totalities? Which I'm thinking back because remember we kind of went through this process in the most abstract form. We went through the logic. Toward the end, we had the mechanical, the
Yep.
chemical, and then life,
Yeah.
and then now we're
Yes. Yes,
going
we
through it
did.
again.
We did.
Yeah, now we're going through it all again, but even more
But
detail. Yeah,
but it's directly tied to the material reality, the
yeah,
phenomenal reality.
and
Like,
it
oh, that's
required.
fascinating.
Yeah,
So you have the system of ideas, and then you have the system of uh the phenomenal reality, and then you combine the two, and you're dealing with the process of nature, the process of life.
which now
There
we're
it is.
probably going to get to the
Fuck.
study of a bit the human side of it. No, we're probably getting into it here, but I'm just trying to think what would that be in phenomenology of mind? No, philosophy of mind. If there's any sense of that, or that's just the study of humans at that point.
Well, I mean, he organizes it in the
Yeah.
same way, and so we'd have to open up that book and
Okay.
and find our place there, the parallel place
Yeah, I'm
there. But
right.
but when he talks, so this last sentence he says, it is the salt which, as
Mm.
product of this neutralization, first is the chemical totality, the center, but it is still not as yet the infinite totality of life, but a totality come to rest and circumscribed by other totalities.
Yeah.
This is a statement that Marx echoes in his I think he echoes this in Capital Volume 2 or 3, where he says very explicitly, look, the system of capital is not the infinite totality. It is just a totality circumscribed by other totalities. By this, we can know that historically, capitalism is a totality that came to become, and it will eventually dialectically pass away into another totality, the next mode of production, communism, or however that was projected by Marx and his uh, you know I want to say group of thinkers at the time, but I think Marx and Engels were pretty much alone among a sea of Proudhons and fucking Durings. But like right here, like the echo. Um, uh, um, yeah. This is something Harrison was talking to me about way back when we were DMing, and he said, "Look, capitalism is not. Uh, it's what what does Marx say? He says it's a pseudo circle rather than the full circle, because if it was the full circle, you could never um, have a revolution outside that takes you outside of capitalism. It would just be the infinite reality, right? Capitalism is not an infinite reality. And these processes, like he says, the creation of the salt is not the infinite totality. It's circumscribed by other. So I'll stop talking there, but it's like coming together for me as I talk about it. We've only got 5 minutes, but I'll just read out this real quick because it's real short, if that's okay. The
Yeah.
process in its totality. So these neutral bodies, the salt, I'm guessing,
Mhm.
returning into mutual relation, form the chemical process in its complete reality. For the sides of the process are such real bodies. Their mediation requires water, the abstract medium of neutrality, but the sides, being neutral on their own account, are not differentiated as against each other. Here we have the particularization of general neutrality, and with it also the particularization of the differences of the chemically active bodies and their mutual opposition. This is the so-called elective in affinity, the formation of other particular neutralities through the breakup of those already present. And notice he said the so-called elective affinity. It reminds
Mhm.
me of Marx saying the so-called primitive accumulation. Like, um, so like there's a common way of thinking about this, and then there's what's actually going on in a processual form, I guess you could say. Maybe I'm wrong about that. So-called elective affinity.
Which is, wait a minute. There's a
Almost like it was chosen, but really it's an affinity that's
is a different Goth that had a theory of elective affinities than his.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean maybe, I don't know. Uh, Richter and Guiton Morveau. My French is absolutely abysmal. Guiton.
No, it's the same Goth that had elected affinity. Okay. I
Okay.
thought that's funny if he's criticizing. Anyways,
You are really hurting my ears, sir, by saying Goth. I'm like,
say
ah,
it. How do you pronounce
ah.
it?
Goethe.
Goethe.
Yeah, it's an umlaut O, so
Oh, and
it
that's why I can't see it because nothing I'm searching actually shows it.
yeah, it's G-O umlaut
Goethe.
T-H-E.
Okay.
And usually people like say
I would have
O-E, but O-E is really O umlaut.
I would have said it better had the actual umlaut.
No, you're fine.
I know.
I've heard other people say the same thing, and
I'm
it's always
making
like,
fun
don't do
of
that.
search results for English dropping all these special characters.
Isn't it terrible? God. Yeah. Search results are the worst. We need better AI. Get on that, Kyle.
Hmm. Okay. The most important step towards simplification of the details of elective affinity is a law discovered by Richter and Gutian-Mavo, which states that neutral compounds suffer no alteration in regard to their state of saturation when they are mixed in solution, and the acids exchange bases with each other. It is on the basis of this law that the quantitative scale of acids and alkalis has been constructed, according to which each particular acid is saturated by a specific quantity of a particular acid, that for every other acid, the alkalis retain among themselves the same ratio for the saturation of this acid. As for the first one, all that varies is a quantitative unit of the acids combining with this constant series. In the same way, the acids bear a constant ratio to each other relative to various alkalis, which is that's what I was trying to bring up here. Nope, that's because literally, uh, I almost mispronounced it again. Why is he's the only one that shows up
Hmm.
when it comes to chemistry?
I've become convinced that Google results and even AI results are a little like going to the store and wanting to buy the catalog of Mozart and being issued a CD of the greatest hits,
Okay, there's the modern version.
from which half of the information is redacted, you know.
In chemical physics and physical chemistry, chemical affinity is the electronic property by which dissimilar chemical species are capable of forming chemical compounds. Which, yeah, is this?
Yeah.
Oh, that's because Goethe took the examples of elective affinities and wrote a novel that simulates this, that theory.
Of course he did.
Yes.
He was a genius. Okay, what else would you do with the theory of elective affinity, but write a goddamn novel and it become like, yeah, an instant classic. Uh, this is one of this is one of the pieces of cultural history that I'm missing. I need to go and read Goethe in full, or at
Yeah,
least go and read
parent here.
at least start with Faust, you know? Hi, sweetie.
Tendency
You
of
going
an
to bed?
atom compound.
Good night. Love you. Sweet dreams.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Faust also Mary Shelley's Frankenstein because she was
Brush your teeth.
inspired by Galvanism.
Brush. Brush your teeth, sweetie. Love you. What were you saying, Jim?
And
Sorry.
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, she was very much inspired by the Galvano's research on electricity and on
Yes.
muscle action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another book that I have seen multiple adaptations for, but have never actually read the book. I need to. Oh, um, the audiobook for Frankenstein was done by like a famous British actor who I couldn't tell you his name if you put a gun to my head. It's like uh, he's in Good Omens, but you guys probably don't know what that is. Um, Derek Derek Jacobi,
Yeah.
like he did the audiobook. So it's got to be good if he did it. And it is 902.
Yeah.
So I think the process in its totality will have to wait till next time.
Yeah, it's fine. This was a fun, fun discussion this time around.
No, no, it
The
was
team are more
absolutely.
active.
Let's see how far this goes real quick. Process. So you start with so there's the process in its totality, and then there's disso dissociation. I forget what one was. Um, but we're getting into number two,
Yeah.
and it's a long thing. Let's call it stop at 269. So, um,
What did I miss? Oh, it is.
261 to 269. I know that's only 8 pages, but it kind of tracks what we just did today out loud. You know, I could say a little further, but I don't think we'll get there.
Yeah, also unrelated. Remember, Matt, I was complaining about my insulin pump and I had to have a separate device because
Yeah.
they kept not. I ended up giving up on the fold, finally getting a new phone, and boom, because of that, I can use it with my pump. So now I only have one device for both my diabetes.
What was it, an iPhone or an Android?
Android, I was having the Galaxy Fold. They were never validating those, so I ended up doing a regular, like I guess the highest end Samsung regular Galaxy, and that's worked.
Yeah, one thing I've found is that like different manufacturers deliver different compatibilities. And like if you don't do your research, you can end up with something that just isn't
And,
compatible with
well,
any of your shit unless you
they're both Samsung, that was the thing.
I know. And that's the thing. Like they're both of the same manufacturer, but they both have different firmwares and different configurations and like all of it's opaque. Like um anyway, sorry. Um I was trying to think of like where you would research such a thing, and the first thing that came to my mind was like Reddit, because half the time people get on Reddit to bitch about all the technical shit that they have, um, and like people you
Well, I
chime
mean,
in from their
remember
experience.
that was used so much. The Google Gemini was using those for results
Yeah.
to an effectively bad degree because it was also taking all the joke answers as real. Do you remember that?
Uh God, yeah, God, that's terrible. That is truly horrid.
Like,
Um,
yeah, you can also use glue on to put your stick your pizza together. Like that was a joke response.
yes, yes, absolutely. Like as the internet has never been a better research tool, I think, for like mundane things. Like on YouTube, I literally figured out how to fix my wife's broken IKEA chair. Like a guy had the exact same problem because like IKEA puts together most of their furniture with staples underneath, like all the wood is stapled together. And eventually, after you've sat in it for like 5 years, which is what happened to us, eventually part of the structure gives ways because they're literally staples instead of screws. And so you have to pull out the offending, piece of 2x4 or whatever and remanufacture it, and instead of stapling it in, screw it in to the goddamn thing.
Even
Which is what I'm gonna have to do.
The
Oh, I know.
Walmart desk
I,
is
I
screwed.
know. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So don't buy your don't buy don't buy your furniture from IKEA. Okay. Most of that shit is stapled together and stapled and glued. All right. And I mean, it lasts. It can last a long time. But if you have any part of that structure that has a weak spot, it will crumble like I mean, uh well, okay. It's not only staple and glued together, but most of it's made of like particle board. Like, hey, hang on. Look at this. So this is part of a wingback chair. Okay. And you look at like the upholstery is gorgeous. But if you look at what's behind it, you can see the particle board.
Yeah.
That's it. So looks good in theory, but if this ever falls apart, I mean, it's gonna snap in two like like dried toast. Don't buy your furniture at IKEA. Then again,
What?
if you're on a budget, and you don't care, buy
Yeah.
it.
Luckily, I have to order my IKEA because there's nothing nearby.
Yeah,
So it's just cheap. It's just as expensive to go to Walmart.
yeah. Now I would throw it in the garbage, and it would be easy to, but then I would have to go and buy another $400 chair of this exact same quality. Or I can go to Home Depot and get them to cut me a piece of wood and screw it in, which is what I'm going to do. Because might as well try for another year on this chair. I think it's the right decision, but I'm also like, God, I'm not into woodworking.
All right.
All right. Anyway,
I'm
uh, all right,
big.
comrades, 261 to 269.
Yep.
And I'll see you on the DMs. It's great talking to you, comrades. You have a great week.
Thanks. You too.